What comes to your mind when you think of the number 666? We find that number in Revelation chapter 13, and it's tied to the infamous mark of the beast, which, biblically speaking, is the worst thing that can ever happen to you. So you're probably not thinking good things about that number, but are you thinking lawfare about that number? Because it turns out, when you understand prophecy properly, that lawfare and the mark of the beast are not separate issues at all. Today on Something's Happening Here, we are concluding our discussion on lawfare that we've been having all week long, and we are doing so prophetically. So make sure to put on your prophecy hats and join me for an in-depth look at Revelation chapter 13. May God bless you. Hello, friends. Welcome back. Today is Friday. Thank you for being patient with us as we've only had 3 shows this week instead of the traditional format of 5. I hope that you remember that all of this is because we at Talking Donkey International are going through some changes right now. So a transition point. And so until all of those changes are ready to be released formally, we just have this slight format change to help us through the transition on our end. So thank you for your patience, and hopefully it will be worth it to you because we are ending the week in prophecy. I hope that you put on your prophecy hat. By the way, I'm curious if any of you would be interested in actually buying a prophecy hat, because that is one of the discussions we've been having on this end, how to maybe create something's happening here merchandise. And so since I mentioned the prophecy hat, that might be a fun idea. Keep your eyes open for that or something similar. We're talking about Revelation 13 today in the context of lawfare, which has been our topic all week long. And I have in the past spent an hour or more on this issue, specifically in Revelation 13 and the mark of the beast and 666. We don't have that kind of time in this format. So this is just my kind of repeated reminder that there's a lot more to say on this than we're going to have the chance to say today. If you are curious to learn more, you can always let us know, and we'd be happy to reach out to you with additional materials or additional sermons or whatever, right? So you just let us know if you want to learn more. Leave us a comment wherever you're watching this, or if there's a way to contact us through tdimedia.org, then you use that. In any case, we will be sure to get back to you if you really need more help. But I should say on the front end, and this is coming from a place of dissatisfaction from one of our viewers who I don't even know how he discovered this, but he was really mad at me because he discovered that I am a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and he felt deceived because I don't like mention that every week. And my answer to him was like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and so is everybody else at Talking Donkey International. Why does that matter? And he accused me of like, using Adventist doctrine and not being faithful in my teaching or whatnot. So I said, I'm just teaching from the Bible. Is there anything that I say from the Bible that seems wrong to you? And he never answered me. So I don't think so. I think it was just prejudice. But to avoid similar comments after this show, I want to be upfront with you that I am a baptized Seventh-day Adventist Christian in good standing with the church. And I have a lot of reasons why I believe what I'm going to share with you today. But the only one of those reasons, actually, I'm going to give you 2 reasons, but those reasons come from the Bible only. And I'm going to make my case from the Bible only, which is the same Bible you have, regardless of what church you belong to. And if you don't belong to any church, you can go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com and buy one of these, the same exact thing that I have, and see it for yourself. The reason it was important to go through that is because the mark of the beast, 666, and the lawfare component that we're going to talk about today is a commonly discussed thing within the Seventh-day Adventist faith. And many people make the mistake of thinking it's specifically Adventist theology, but of course it's not. It's all biblical theology informed by history, actually. So we're going to see that today. And that's my introduction. That's so that we're all on the same page and no one's going to get mad at me after the fact if you want to do more research on your own and you discover the Adventist church in that research. Like I'm telling you on the front end where we're coming from. So the format today will be a little different. I'm going to actually go to the article for today after we go to the scriptures first. So please open your Bibles to Revelation chapter 13, which of course is where we find this number 666. We want to understand what the Bible says about it, and then what the Bible implies about it, and which we can draw some conclusions from history. And then we'll go from there. So chapter 13 is the story of two wicked beasts. So they are obviously different entities on the world. If you really want to play that prophecy game and try to identify who prophecy is talking about, you can do that. And they are not the same thing. These two separate beasts are two different entities in the world. And yet they have a lot in common. Ultimately, they both serve Satan and both do so in the name of God. So that is the link between them, and they enter into a partnership together at the very end of time before Jesus returns. Verse 18 is where we find that mysterious number. It reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Okay. So what we just learned there is that 666 and the mark of the beast are not actually the same thing. Because actually we get that from verse 17, which we didn't read yet. Sorry about that. But the number itself is the number of the beast. It's not the mark of the beast. Those are different things. And it's also the number of a man. So there's some sort of human element in all of this, a male element specifically. And that number is a wicked number. If you have that number, good things are not going to happen to you. That ultimately means that you will lose out on eternal life and miss out on salvation, and the gospel is not for you. So that's why I said it's the worst thing that can happen, biblically speaking, because every other sin has atonement available, but not this one. This is the highest crime against God because it's ultimately worshiping the devil in God's name, right? And so that's just the worst thing that you can do. Let's back up to verse 15 to get some context about what this number is. He, now who's he? He refers to that second of the two beasts that I was telling you about. We meet the second one in verse 11, and we have actually discussed that second beast on this show. Something's happening here many times. So I'm not going to use the time to go through that again, but if you want to, you can easily find in our archives multiple instances of us discussing who this beast is. But he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast. Now, that's referring to the first beast from verses 1 through 10 of the same chapter. So that's why they are in partnership here. The second beast gets authority to give breath to the image of that first beast. In other words, that first beast is wicked in and of itself, but it takes the power and authority of the second beast to like bring it into the world, I guess. That's not the best way to put that, but to make it something that needs to be reckoned with and contended with. Absent of the influence of the second beast, the first beast is not going to have the worldwide dominance that prophecy demands, right? So it really requires this demonic partnership between the two. And then continuing verse 15. so that the image of the beast, of that first beast, should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Okay, so there's a death decree in there, right? That first beast comes along and says, "Hey, I am the object of worship." And the second beast comes along and says, "He's right. He is the object of worship. You better go do that or else." And then that first beast says, "Oh, you see? I am correct. And or else you will worship as I say so, or else you will die. So under penalty of death, you will do what I say." Verse 16. He, second beast, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So that's what I was getting at a minute ago, where the number and the mark are not actually the same thing, although they are, for all intents and purposes, equivalent, right? They both have the same consequence for receiving them. But they are in fact different. So this number 666 goes on your hand or on your forehead because when we go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, that is where the words of God were supposed to be as a frontlet in between your eyes, I think is what it says, or on your hand. I don't actually remember if on your hand is in Deuteronomy 6 or not, but this is where the imagery of it being on your forehead comes from. And it's because God said that's where God's words should be. So Antichrist or the devil comes along and says, no, 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 no. That's where I want to be instead. So it goes on your forehead because that's where you do your thinking and believing. And if you actually choose to believe the false version of the gospel, then that mark goes right here. If maybe you don't so much believe it, but you also don't want to be killed and you don't want to lose buying power because it says you can't buy or sell unless you have it. So for whatever practical reason, you simply follow along anyway, whether you believe it or not. That's why it goes in your hand. You either do it or you believe it, but either way, you end up on the wrong side of God. So what is it? What does 666 represent that is so wicked? And I do have an article that gets to it, but I want to reach that same conclusion in a different way. So travel back in time with me, if you would, please. We're going to go back to ancient Rome in the picture that we're going to look at, although we can easily go back even further than that to ancient Babylon and find the exact same thing. So my producer hopefully has this on the screen for you. What you're looking at are two medallions. So it's the front and the back of two different medallions. And they have some things in common. They both have a number grid on one side. And that number grid is outlined in a very specific way. It is the numbers 1 through 36, and they are arranged so that every row adds up to 111, and every column adds up to 111, so that when you add up all 6 rows together, your sum total is 666. And similarly, if you add up all the columns together, your sum total is 666. Similarly, if you simply add all of the numbers together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 36, you will get 666. Isn't that wild? And so this number grid was designed on purpose to reach that sum, 666, in at least 3 different methods to get there. And if you examine really closely, the bottom of the 2 medallions has a little yellow box around something that I don't know how clearly you can see it, but that is the number itself, 666. Listed right there on the medallion as the desired sum that you get from the number grid itself. So what does this mean? Well, these medallions are ancient medallions for priests. So priests of not Jewish priests, not Christian priests, obviously, but some sort of pagan priest would wear these medallions in the religious exercise that he would be involved in. And when you look at notably the bottom of the two medallions on the front side, you'll see exactly what they were worshiping. That is a picture of the sun right there in the middle. I believe that it is the moon above the sun there in that same image, but I'm not certain about that. But if you look at the words in the circumference of that picture, you'll see the word solace right there at the top. Solus, from which we get solar, meaning of the sun. These were sun worshiping priests, and these were sun worshiping medallions. And as I said, this comes from Rome, which is why you see Latin words around this medallion, but you could easily go back to ancient Babylon and find the same thing, because biblically speaking, sun worship is inherently Babylonian. You could go back to all the way to Genesis chapter 10, meet a character named Nimrod, and although he is not designated in the Bible as the author of sun worship, Babylonian legend itself pinpoints Nimrod as the origin point for sun worship. And his wife Semiramis was the origin point of lunar worship or moon worship. So the two of them together become like the mother and father of all paganism. And then as their ideas spread from Babylon across the world, that's why virtually every religion known to man except monotheism worships the sun. Like every culture has a sun worshiping holiday in it, or a god of the sun that receives worship, all going back to that one origin point. So therefore, all of that is to say that 666 is inherently tied to sun worship, the worship of the sun. Therefore, what Revelation is warning us against at the end of time before Christ returns is some sort of legalized push, like a cultural push with the strength of the law behind it and consequences for breaking it, that is tied to the worship of the sun. Very literally, you will worship the sun in this way or else. Okay. That being said, I know that may even sound like crazy. If you've never heard that before and you look at the world around you, you think like, that's nuts. What is this preacher even talking about? But it's not nuts. And let's go to the article for today, which is going to reach the same conclusion, but from a different avenue. This is from the Northeast Georgian. It's, I guess, a local paper in the state of Georgia. The date on this is March 30, 2022. So it's about a year old, no, 2 years old. And the title is Sunday Worship the Mark of the Beast? Let's first look at the reason that the billboards were put up to start with. I guess there were billboards, and it's a local issue. I don't know it all together. But so it's well, let me just read it. The outcry in the newspaper that people in the demonstrations held in the county were saying that the vaccine, meaning the COVID vaccine, was the mark of the beast is not true. Whether you take a vaccine or not has nothing to do with worship, and that is what the mark of the beast is all about. Worship. Brother Lyons started out saying that Sunday worship had nothing to do with 666, but it does. The number 666 is the number of a man, and that man is the man of sin spoken of by the Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. The article is going to go on to specifically identify the Catholic Church and the Pope, or the head of the Catholic Church, as what the prophecy is referring to. And I actually agree with that. The article does not do a great job of demonstrating why we reached that conclusion. It does like an okay job, but a much better job can be done if we had the time to go through it. But anyway, it says, that man is known as the Vicar of Christ, the official name of the Pontiff or Pope of Rome. Revelation 13:18 is where you find 666, and it is associated with the papacy. In their book, the quote, Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, page 50, they brag about it. The sign of their authority is in changing the solemnity of the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. The Protestant churches accepted Sunday as God's day of worship because that is what the reformers were taught, and they didn't know any better. I'll let you read the rest of the article on your own, but the takeaway, the conclusion is that at some point in the future before Jesus returns, there will be a legalized push here in the United States, which will then spread across the world because of this partnership between the two beasts. It will be a legalized push to require Sunday to be observed as a holy day. Require it or else. Now, again, when I first heard that idea many years ago, I thought it was crazy, but I just didn't know any better. It turns out in the 1890s, in the United States, there was not one, but two large-scale efforts to actually amend the United States Constitution to include a mandate for Sunday worship. You should look that up. I mean, I know that seems crazy, but it's not. It really happened two times in the 1890s. Obviously, it didn't work. There is no such amendment in the Constitution to that effect, but prophecy always has a first fruits or a smaller version of the big thing that's coming. And I will suggest to you that that push in the 1890s was the first fruits of what is prophesied still to come in the future. If we accept that to be true, if we just accept the entire premise, what that means is that at some point in the future, in the prophetic future before Jesus returns, lawfare will be waged against every believer, but against every person, whether you're a believer or not. Remember, the mark goes in your head if you're a believer, but it goes in your hand if you're just going along with the party anyway. Every living human being will be subjected to this lawfare, and the consequences for being on the wrong side of that lawfare is A, being disconnected from society. Your money won't work. You can't buy or sell. And then B, to be actively killed. And so because those are the consequences, many people will take the mark of the beast in their hand because they don't want to go without food and they don't want to be killed, right? So they'll just do whatever the beast says, right? Just let me live. And it takes wisdom. That's why Revelation 13:18 says wisdom. Wisdom is required. And not earthly wisdom, but divine wisdom with the mind of Christ that is required to be able to get through those days unscathed. You have to recognize that the entire world is against you, but the Lord is for you. And by standing up for his principles and resisting the mark of the beast, resisting this enforced Sunday worship, you're actually doing the will of God. And therefore you can receive the promises that he makes to you in like Psalm 91, for example, or Revelation chapter 3, verse 10, for example, or any of the other places that are specific to that moment in time where God says, I will protect you. And it will require faith to look at the world that wants to kill you and say, but my Lord said otherwise. Have you ever been confronted with the idea that lawfare is inherent to eschatology? Or maybe you don't even know what eschatology means. That is the study of end times things, the study of the final things before Jesus comes, the end of human history as we know it. It's all about lawfare. And so, to tie it back to the beginning of the week, when we see the mechanisms of lawfare already in motion against Donald Trump in this particular instance, and his supporters and the January 6th defendants and all that stuff, when we see the mechanism of lawfare is alive and well, and it appears to be a well-oiled machine, although it clearly could use a little bit more oil. You've got these actors like Fannie Willis who are messing the whole thing up. But it is a really well-oiled machine. It's very efficient, and it should give us pause. It should actually make us take a step back and say, my goodness gracious, I don't want that turned against me. And what can we do about it? Well, prophetically speaking, nothing. It's going to happen. It is written. There's nothing we can do about it. And we wouldn't even want to do anything about it because that means Jesus is coming soon. Hallelujah. But what can we do with that knowledge? Number one, we can recognize that Jesus is the only answer. And the most important thing that we can do in any given day is to draw near to Jesus. This is the most important thing you can do today, is to ask Jesus to be your Lord and Savior and to confess your sin. The second most important thing that you can do today is to learn the rest of the prophecies so that you can be aware of what is said to be coming and make appropriate accommodations for it. For example, there's no one prescription, but it's a lot easier to control people in a populated city. You may have noticed it is the populated states and the populated cities specifically that received the brunt of the COVID-19 heavy-handedness that happened from 2020 through 22, or even beyond that in certain circumstances. You didn't really find a lot of that in like the rural towns with a couple thousand people in it, because it's just harder to control people when they're all spread out. So maybe, just maybe, you want to try to de-urbanize your life a little bit. Find a house out in the country somewhere, or just try to orient your life toward the simplicity that is in Christ, the simplicity of living. That's going to be tough, right? It's hard to disconnect from the materialism, but when we know that the materialism all around us will be weaponized against us someday, maybe it won't be so hard. And then number three is just to stay in that relationship with Jesus all the way until the end. It's not any more complicated than that. Know him, prepare accordingly, stay with him until the end. And if you do those things, then I will see you in heaven when we get there, when we all get there together at the return of Jesus Christ. And that brings us to the end of our discussion of lawfare. It is not a good thing, but it will probably be how life on earth continues until the very end. Now that we've got a taste of it in our mouths in the modern sense, and we know prophetically that it's going to keep coming, it's probably not going to abate in any significant way between now and then. So, do we need Jesus today? Of course we do. Let's close out our week of discussing this problem by confessing to the Lord right now. And if you have never done so, and you've never received him as your Lord and Savior, then your entire life has been leading up to this moment right now. Please pray with me. Loving Father in heaven, it is a scary idea to think that we have to go up against the entire world, having faith in an invisible God to do what he has said he was going to do in a book written thousands of years ago. And yet that's what you have called us to do. So give us grace and give us wisdom. And more importantly than even the grace and the wisdom, Lord, be our Lord and Savior. I invite everyone to say these words, Lord, I am a sinner, and there's nothing I can do about that. I give my sin to Jesus. Please come into my heart, cleanse me of all of my unrighteousness, and take up residence there to be my God each and every day until you come. Lord, thank you for saving my soul, for cleansing me of sin, and for being my Savior. Thank you all the way into eternity. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. And with that, I actually don't want to make you any promises about next week because we're in a transition and I don't actually know what next week will bring, but there's a good possibility that I'll see you back here on Monday in one form or another, and may God bless you between now and then.